Amen. All right. This morning, for a couple of minutes, I'd like to share a few thoughts on the subject of the truth from unexpected sources. The truth from unexpected sources. Now, it is true that sorry, we're all we have been all trained. Um, we have been all trained to accept things from certain places of authority, right? When I was growing up, there were three authoritative sources in my life: my father, the pastor, and the doctor. There were three authoritative sources in my life. What I've come to find, though, as I grew up, I came to find that the three sources led me down some wrong paths. My father, and I forgive him because he didn't know, because he's just like me, was trained just like me. He was taught things that were taught to him. He didn't know any better, but he's a good man. And why I say he's a good man, I believe he's an honest person. That when I came to find that there were things that he taught me in the spiritual realm that were not true, just blatantly not true, and I started showing him these things, he didn't stand as a father and says, "Are you disrespecting my authority?" No, no, no. He said, "I have never seen anything like this before." And so my father, he didn't have pride, but he had an honest heart. He accepted the truth because all I was showing was the Bible. I never showed him any quotation from any prophet or so called prophet. I never showed him any quotation from anybody else. I said, but look at what the Bible says, right? And I realized that in growing up in the spiritual realm, I was never taught to trust the Spirit of God. I was never taught to pray for answers. Never. I was always led to books or led to the pastor to get the answer. But be that it is may as it may, my father ended up um, leaving the church. Well, somebody said that my father never left the church. He said that the church left my father because the church is a movement. You ever heard one of those moving sermons? The church is a movement. And so you can't leave the church of God. The church of God moves along and leaves you. And everybody says amen. You know that kind of perspective? Right. So anyway, he ended up leaving or cutting his association after 35 years or 40 years of being an elder. I think there's a certificate still in my old house there of getting that from the conference as an honorary appreciation for how long service award. And the truth is, Christianity don't offer long service award. There's no such thing. You either are or you're not, right? Anyway, but he ended up he ended up worshiping with me for a while and with us here. But he was alone by himself over there. A few, or maybe once or twice a month, we'd probably be able to link up. But appreciated the fact that he acknowledged where he was wrong and made amends, right? I'm still today the black sheep of the family and accused of leading my father astray. However, that works out. It doesn't matter much to me. The next person was the pastor, right? And I understand that the pastor's perspective is honored and respected by the. You know what was funny? Um, there's a when I was in the church, I had a group of children, young children that I trained, that I had a singing group and all that. We were traveling all over Jamaica and so on. And so one of the members of the group who grew up in my hand is now a pastor. He grew up right in my hand. So I've been to this is the second funeral that so he's the pastor over in where I grew up in my district. And so I went over there on Sunday last to bury my uncle's wife. I don't know how you say she's, you say her aunt, right? Right. So anyway, so we went to bury her. She lived 94, did pretty well. And he's the pastor. But every time that we go to the first funeral we went, they asked us. Well, I did a tribute, and my family sang a song, and then they called the elder of the church called me and said they don't have a meditation song, if we could do a meditation song as well. I said no problem. So we did another song, and then the pastor saying all of these lovely things about me. Now I realize that many people were looking because they have heard that I'm an offshoot. They've heard that I'm not really in the Adventist system, right? And so for the Adventist pastor to be now talking about me and say he grew up in my hand and so and so and so is really very interesting. Yeah, man. The pastor knows, but he didn't mention that at all. And even in my little talk, I kind of referred to him and talked to him a little bit about just being there, that he's in my community and so on. But anyway, this last Sunday when we were there, um, my sister was asked to do a song, and that she could do a song, both of us, myself and my sister. So we end up preparing for one song. I had the meeting to come back to. I had quite a few things to do, so I decided, all right, what I'll do, I'll just go do that song and come home, and we'll just leave early. When we went there were 3 items on the program for me. And I'm thinking, but nobody told me that. I was just basically helping out my sister. But anyway, it was good again. It was the same pastor, and we have had many discussions here, and he's one of the pastors that I think is not necessarily, well. Let me not make that comment because others might know who he is, and it might be a negative comment. But anyway, I believe that he knows my position. We have talked together. When we get to any point that he really needs to make this decision, he says, "We'll talk again." But we never were able to sit down and to discuss things and for him to look at the reality of what I'm saying. So back to the perspective of pastor being an authoritative source in my life. I'm talking about when I was growing up. Now now I'm older, and now I can argue with pastors and argue with presidents and argue with anybody because I realize now I'm free in Jesus. And I realized nobody told me about that kind of a freedom when I was growing up. Nobody told me how free I was in Jesus. Nobody told me that one is your master, even Christ, and all your brethren. Nobody told me that pastor and I are on the same level. Nobody told me. And what's interesting? I'm just thinking about this. That my daughter saw something in Jeremiah the other day, and she said, "Dad, do you know that pastors is in the Bible?" And I said, "Really?" And I said, "No, man, I know pastors are there." So, but here's an interesting thing. Let's see if I can do this quickly. All right, what am I to do? All right, look with me at something here that I found to be interesting. Let's go to the book of Jeremiah. Um, Jeremiah is the place that I think my daughter saw that verse because Paul does talk about pastors in the New Testament, right? But anyway, but that's Jeremiah. Jeremiah. So let me show you a progression here. Go with me to Jeremiah 3 and verse 15. Look at this. And let's see. Oh, go again. 3:15. Right. So Jeremiah 3:15. Let's read together here what it says in verse 15. Here's what it says. And I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. So this was God's plan. This God's purpose of pastors was what? He would give them pastors according to his own heart. That would do what for them now? Feed them with what now? Knowledge and understanding. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with those two and the differences between those two, but we'll talk about that another time. Let's go down to chapter. Do I have that right? Let's go down to chapter 10. Chapter 10 and chapter 10 and verse 21. I have all of this mixed up. I have too much. I have too many things open here. That's off. Did I say 21? Let's see what it says here in verse 21. For the pastors are become what now? Brutish, and have not sought the Lord, therefore they shall not prosper. And what will happen as a result? And all their flocks shall be scattered. Let's go to the next. I'm showing a progression here in Jeremiah. Let's go to chapter 23. This is the last one, chapter 23 and verse 1. And look at what it says here. I'm not sure if that was the verse my daughter mentioned that she saw. Yeah, so look at this one now. In verse 1 of chapter 23. Woe be unto who now? The pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, saith the Lord. Now, why am I mentioning all of this? The intent of God for pastors was that pastors would be after his own heart, that pastors would be leading people into understanding and what else? Knowledge and understanding. Now, the perspective is knowledge is mental accentuation, understanding is practical experience. So that's what a pastor was supposed to help in guiding the people of God to. The pastor was not supposed to be a mini God, and that's what the pastors have become today. The pastor is a mini God. we, man, I have so many stories of growing up and changing pastors. I mean, quite a few pastors in my little lifetime, my little time at home. And I remember one pastor came and they had a I was 15 and sitting on the board, the committee, right? What do they call it? Board. I don't remember. But anyway, and the pastor was upset. The pastor says when he drives in the yard, nobody don't come out and meet him and take his briefcase and go in the church, right? And they had some things in there, man. And I was 15. I don't even comment. I just listen to people like my father and so on. Say, so are you a God? Right? But there are pastors like that because they're honored and lifted up to that place of authority, and people give them that kind of authority. So the pastor was the second authoritative figure in my life. And but I told you, when I actually had challenges in my own mind as a young boy, I was 10. I passed the common entrance, went to high school, and here was introduced to the biology, right? And it's strange enough, the biology teacher was an Adventist in this high school. And so, first time I've ever heard she said that the word history actually meant his story. I never knew that. That's a compound word, and so on. That the true history actually has to do with Christ. Did you know that? I didn't even know that, and that was years ago, right? Anyway, but in dealing with this biology, I mean, she as a Christian still was teaching us this perspective of man, man coming from one cell amoeba, from or through aeons and billions of years until gradually went into different forms till they became Homo sapiens, man the wise one. And so I went to church with the perspective of what was written in the books versus what we were taught. From my childhood, kindergarten, coming up and knowing that there's a God and there's creation and so on. And in high school, there's no such thing because we developed, evolved is the word. And so I was amazed when they asked the question to the pastor, that, yes, I asked the question like Jerry asked this morning. I asked the question, and I asked the question. And the pastor said, well, we all know that that is wrong. And he told the church, he said, and everybody agrees that that is wrong. But his suggestion was, I right the wrong to get the grade, but I know it's wrong. And I had a problem with that. I had a challenge with that. And then I was introduced to certain things like white collar lies and different things like that. That perspective, that you do the wrong, even though you know it's wrong, because you're seeking accreditation from the people who are wrong. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense, right? Go ahead, my sister. And a quick one, because I don't want to take too much of a comment here. I agree, most definitely. Most definitely. And I can understand why when people go to university and so on, they come out more wiser. They're wiser than God, and they don't believe in God anymore. And I understand why. Okay, now the doctor was the next authoritative source, and I agree that it's what you're taught. You can only say what you have been taught. You can only say what you have learned. Can you say anything different? I mean, the doctors were never taught nutrition. They had very limited classes in nutrition, right? They're more taught to to administer drugs, to administer medicine that is not necessarily food. It's like Hippocrates said, that Hippocrates says that you should let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. But this is not something we're talking. Brother Vincent and I were talking this morning about how we grew up, and now I think there's a dengue season. The dengue flu is going around. Everybody's getting dengue around us here. But when we were growing up, it never matter what it was. Give it any name you want. Dengue, Zika, whatever, Chick V, whatever. It didn't. Well, those didn't exist in those days anyway. But malaria. But whatever it was, it didn't matter. My father knew how to deal with any flu symptom, anything like that came on us. We would He would be able to deal with that. And we were talking about just the different herbs and the different bushes that we say Jamaica bushes, the different herbs that we generally use. Is that my father just goes out and he knows what to get: leaf of life, jack in the bush, quack, or cirrus, whatever. And he 7 bushes and he puts them together in what we call a zinc pan. In those days, they used to kerosene tin, zinc pan, the same thing. There's still oil in it, and you'll boil that up, make a big fire, and boil that, and then you'll pour that in the wash tub. At that time, it was made from galvanized material, and when that is poured in, my mother would put the scrubbing board right across that pan, and we'll sit over that thing naked. We'll sit over that thing naked, and they'll throw a big blanket over you. And let me tell you, you go through hell for 15 minutes, right? Because you have to breathe in that hot steam that's coming off, and look here, you're just sweating and sweating. And when you're done, they dry you off, rub you up with some whatever, mentholated spirit, whatever it is, and bed. Next morning, school, right? So I'm telling you, so we grew up that way. We never grew up with medication. Honestly, we never. I mean, there was probably like one pharmacy in a town far away somewhere, right? But people didn't go to pharmacy as such. I mean, I guess the only thing we knew of from growing up was like something like Panadol, like that's from ancient times, right? And so on, right? But and salt physic and those things. I mean, pharmacy at that time used to sell Senapod, leaf. I mean, things like that. That we are. I'm sorry if we are leaving the online audience behind. Forgive me. Let's get back to what we're saying here. Anyway, the purpose though for all of this is the perspective of following the status quo, and the status quo is really that the accepted norm, the thing that everybody um, accepts as the norm, that so you live in this and accepting. As an individual, you're enlightened and you step outside of that norm because you don't have a society moving away from certain things. Accepting something remarkable takes place, like in the Christian world. We spoke about how Jesus drew crowd. I mean, Sister Laura was saying it was because we don't have they didn't have social media in those days, right? But I mean, even today, if somebody arises somewhere that really is able to uplift humanity in any way, shape, or form, people find them. Man, I saw like somebody like TB Joshua. He's dead now, but when TB Joshua, people would fly from different places to go down to Africa to to get healing or whatever. That and this is the truth today. That if somebody, and we were talking about, the church has lost its influence in the world, and it just exists as an empty shell, as an entity with a name but has no real demonstration of authority behind it, right? Except in some cases. Now, today, if I just say today, there are these respected sources in our lives. For example, the government has a big role when it comes to this. We always talk about what is said on the news. We always talk about, do you hear what is said? In America, I know there is this big name called the FDA, and if certain things are not FDA approved, then nobody accepts it, right? Because it is well this government agency actually deals with the with the authentication of food and medicine, or they say drugs, because it's the Food and Drug Administration. And so they deal with the authentication of these things. And once it's stamped FDA, then it's ready, right? Everybody says it's FDA approved, and then you're selling a product, and once you can say it's FDA approved, everybody will go towards that and go for that. Now, you is this really safe? Is the FDA a safe place? That's your decision, right? Whether or not you believe that that is so. But in my own mind, I believe that the faith we exert in these institutions are very, very, very staggering. Um, just this week, I was talking to a young man. I picked him up. I gave him a lift, and we were talking. His mother has a stroke, and I've been there to see her before, and we were just talking about her situation. And I said something to him as it relates to the will. I said many times, it's your will. It's your will to live. It's your will to fight. That is most important. That's the beginning. If you don't have a will to do certain things, you'll just stay there and eventually fade away to death, right? And I have many examples of that. But it's the will. If you don't have that will, because the will determine your fate. The will will determine whether or not you will even make a chance at fighting. You see what I'm saying? It's the will. Anyway, I was saying something to him about he was telling me about the doctors. He was telling me about the medication that his mother was taking, and know that she said no, she has three different problems, Mr. Williams, three different problems. She has enlarged heart, and he was telling me that Mama never had those things. And I said, do you know why? I said, why your mother needs medication? She has a stroke. What is the medication doing? Generally, you say a blood thinner would work out best for a stroke, because stroke sometimes is because of blood too thick, whatever, right? But what's the other medications for, right? And so we were talking, and I said, because people trust the doctor. And she said, he said, you are right. I said, if people trusted the doctor, God, like they trusted the doctors, many of the sicknesses that exist today would not be in existence. And he said something to me. He said, Mr. Williams, I know you have to run. I can tell you a short story. I have a family member that live down south, and he told me where. And he said, she was sick for years and she never told anybody. She kept it secret. And they carried her to the doctor. She finally reached a place where she said, I want to go to the, and she went to the doctor. And the doctor checked her. And when the doctor checked her, the doctor said, Miss, you have 3 days to live. He said, Mr. Williams, my family member died in 3 days. So I said to him, so doctor is God. And he said, that is what I'm thinking. I said, doctor is not God. I say, that family member believe every word the doctor say. And it happened for her just like the doctor said. Because that's, yeah, I mean, most people don't understand that this is the perspective. Who was this? William Shakespeare wrote something where he said, there is nothing good or bad. You heard that before? But thinking makes it so. Anybody ever read that? I'm going to tell you what you hear before, right? So William Shakespeare said, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. You know what Jamaican translate that to say? Belief kills and belief cure. Everybody know that one, right? But nobody know where it came from. It came from Shakespeare. Shakespeare says there's nothing good or bad except you think it is so. Jamaicans say belief kills and belief cures, right? Is that true? It is true. So the question really is, what are you believing? Now I'm going to ask you to think of a certain verse here in the book of Romans. Romans chapter 15. Romans 15. Romans 15. Let's look at verse 4 together. Verse 4. Look at what he says here. For whatsoever things were written aforetime. What is that word? What does it mean? All right, before time, right. Or in the past. Would you agree? They were written for our learning, that we through what now? Through patience and what else? Comfort of the scriptures might have hope. There's another parallel verse I think in Corinthians where it says that that we should learn from these past experiences that upon whom the ends of the world are come. Let's see if I find it. I think it's Corinthians. Probably First Corinthians, if I'm thinking right. First Corinthians probably 10. Yes. First Corinthians 10 and verse 11 says, now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. What's the point I'm making? I'm saying the things that have been written, the things that have been written in the scriptures are written so that we will learn from them. Are written so that we will look, the recorded history. That's what I'm talking about. The recorded history that happened in the past. That's why it's history. It happened in the past. And remember, the true meaning of history is what now? His story. And so the things that happened in the past, if we, especially those of us living in the end, they should take note of them, because they have they will have bearing upon us in the last days. In fact, there's something about the mind and how you remember things. How that happens, I don't know. I've never examined what causes us to remember things that you don't even want to remember, right? Anyway, but I was taught. Let me quote you a verse. Let me quote you a statement. We have nothing to fear for the future, except that we should forget how God has led us and his teachings in our past history. Anybody remember that verse? Well, you weren't so solid in what you were. If you don't remember that verse, that statement, I'm sorry, that statement. Anyway, that statement was from Ellen White, and it's been written in many different yeah, publications. Right. Anyway, so I'm saying, so it's true. I'm just saying that verse is actually a companion to what Paul just said here, that the things that they were written 4 times, we're supposed to be learning from them. Because if God doesn't change, is that true? If he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, we should see the same God working the same way like he did back then. So why don't we? Because we're not learning from what happened. You see the point? Anyway, what I want us to look at a little bit here now is the perspective of a story that we're very familiar with, the story of Balaam's donkey. We talked about this earlier. What was the topic that I announced? What's the topic of today? I didn't. Truth from unexpected sources. Sister Sandy didn't remember. So truth from unexpected sources. Now you know the story quite well. The story of Balaam being a prophet of God, and this story is interesting about this man Balaam, um, and the talking donkey. I remember one famous atheist here in Jamaica. He has a radio program that he talks about the African folklore, that if you have a brother and Nancy, what is the difference with a talking donkey, right? And so anyway, the perspective though is um, he's not aware of the reality of a sovereign God that has control over all nature, right? He's not aware that there is a God that so organizes things that the bank that is under the sea, he sends a teller, which is a fish, to get a piece of money, brings it right up, looks for a worm, pick on the worm. When Peter picks up the fish, he would see a piece of money in the mouth. You remember? So I'm just saying, so for him, it's folklore, just like we have in the African stories, right? But is it? Or is it really the power of God at work? Anyway, so you know the story. Balaam is a prophet of God. Balaam is famous, according to what we're reading, is famous for what? Cursing people and their curse, and blessing people and their blessed. You go and read the story. I think it's somewhere. Anyway, it's this is the perspective of what we're seeing, that Israel came and camped in the plains of Moab. I think that's what the word says. And as they were encamped there in the plains of Moab, um, the king of the Moabites became very afraid, and they were thinking, he said that they're going to eat up everything, the animals are going to eat up all the grass and so on, and they became afraid. So he sent a contingency, he sent a entourage to Balaam and offered him. It's interesting. What passage is that in? um Numbers. All right, so in Numbers 20, it's interesting what it says, that in Numbers 22, that they brought um it's interesting, the phrase that is used. Let me go back to it. I'm sorry. I was just intending to refer to the story and not necessarily to read. Anyway, um, look at what it says about what Balaam did, what Balak did. Um, he sent them. I think about verse 5. I think though, it uses a word. Yes, 7. The elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the rewards of divination in their hand. I mean, I looked at the word, and I never and if you're not, if you're probably not like me, but if I read something like that always catches my attention. It says that they departed with the rewards of divination in their hand, and I'm thinking, reward of divination, what is that? Now when I checked other translations and so on, it was, yes, it was bribery, or what it was, what most translations says, it's money. But it's interesting that they actually, the author here uses the perspective. And why did Moses write this? To say they're left with the rewards of divination. What is that word? I'm going to explore it though, right? It just came across my mind when I was looking at this story. But our dividend, right, which is money, right? So if you think about this though, they came to bribe Balaam to come, and they did. He went and they told him the situation. Now Balaam is a prophet of God. I appreciated what he said. He said, I can't do anything, I must go to God and hear what God says. And God said to him, what are these men in your house? He told them, and God told him what? Remember, it's a story that you all know. God told him, you cannot curse Israel. You cannot. So he went back, he told him, and he says, I cannot, because God will not give me leave. How interesting is that? God will not give me leave. God will not allow me to do it, so I can't. Okay? Does it suggest in a sense in that answer that he probably would have, but God don't want him to? All right. So he told them, he left, they left and went back to Balak. Balak said, look here. Balak sent a different entourage. You read the story, you'll see he sent a different entourage, more honored men, and offered him more money, and he offered him plus a promotion. He was going to promote him highly. All right, so Balak says, well, it doesn't matter what you say, because even if Balak gave me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond what God says. That sounds like a good prophet, right? So he goes back to God, knowing what God said the first time. He goes back to God again, and God says, okay, go. God says to Balaam, go. All right. So Balaam, I suppose, whose eyes were dimmed by the prospect of what he will receive, went. Now he went on his ass, the Bible says, or donkey. And as he was riding down, something interesting transpires. Because as he was riding down, the narrative says that God was very displeased with him, and God sought to kill him. Is that what the word says? And so, oh, you never heard that. So you right. So God sought to kill him. And how was God going to kill him? And the angel of the Lord stood there with a sword in his hand, drawn. Is that what the word says? And so so when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, the donkey turned aside, and Balaam began to, not to use a word, but I was going to say, Jamaican, we say murder the donkey, right? But yeah, but he began to put on some licks on the donkey. And so the donkey got back in the path again and started going on, right? And he was going through a narrow place. The Bible says that there was a wall on this side and there was a wall on the other side. And the angel was stood right in the alley. And when the donkey saw the angel, the donkey turned and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. That's what the Bible says. And Balaam began to beat the donkey mercilessly. And the donkey started to talk to Balaam. And Balaam, in his fury, didn't realize that he was not now communicating with an animal. Now, what is the topic of my story? That's the story of my sermon. Yes. Truth from unexpected sources. Now, so the donkey started and said, all this time I've served you. What have I done for you to do this? And in the conversation, the Bible said that his eyes were opened and he saw the angel of the Lord with his sword drawn. Now, did he apologize to the donkey? That is not recorded, right? But I'm saying to you that sometimes when you are bent on certain things, when you are bent on following after fame, fortune, when you are bent on following after the dictates of a government, you go against God and unwillingly, no, not unwillingly, willingly. Sometimes it's not that you don't know the will of God. You know the will of God, but certain things seem to overtake you. Certain things have more pull, I guess, maybe. Certain things have more drawing than the power of God, right? And so you go towards that source. And even though truth came from a donkey, even though a donkey stopped him in his tracks, did that hinder Balaam from going? No. Balaam still went, and Balaam followed Balak to one place, and you heard Balaam tell Balak to do? He said, build 7 altars. And they offered rams and whatever. They offered sacrifices, and Balaam stood to curse Israel, and a blessing came out. And Balak says, look here, don't stand up here, so look, we go over another place. And they went to 3 different places. And every time that he opened his mouth, you remember what the Lord told him? He says, go, but you speak only what I put in your mouth. And isn't that interesting? That I mean, I think about Balaam. I would like to be a prophet like Balaam, to hear from God like that, and to know that everywhere I go, it is His word. But Jesus promised that in the New Testament, didn't He? He says, "Don't worry when they shall bring you before governors and so on for my name's sake." I wonder who will ever be in that place. I look at the world today. I look at the people around, and I wonder who will ever be in that place that you'll be persecuted for righteousness' sake. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, when you look at the way that you're living and how easily we compromise just to make ends meet, how easily we compromise just to survive. Who will ever stand to be persecuted for righteousness' sake, or brought before kings and governors for my name's sake? Who will ever stand? Well, that's a personal question, I suppose. You know what? I'm looking back in the not so distant past, and I'm looking at things that have faced this world. I'm looking at things that were a challenge in this world, and I've seen where men of God, pastors and leaders of churches, encourage their congregants to go and do things, to put poison in their bodies, without saying to them, "Look here, I am not in this now. That's you and God. So you go, hear what God tells you to do, and follow your heart." Have you ever heard anybody tell you that? No. Most people say this, I don't think, and this is so on. Look here. I realize why. You know the word says? Paul says that there's no marvel that anybody remember what he said? Anybody remember what he says? Yes. He says that the devil is transformed into an angel of light. And it's no marvel that his ministers are also transformed into the same. How is that possible? So you mean Satan is in the church preaching, and the ministers of the devil is in the church leading people in certain direction? That's what he says. So I have to accept that he knows what he's saying, and it is the truth, right? So what we're thinking, no, 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 this person is a man of God. No, it's not the man of God. It is the heart that is connected. Well, who could have been a greater man of God than the Apostle Paul? Not just in words, but in demonstration of that reality. And yet, when he went to Berea and he started to expose and to expound the word of God, do you know what the Bereans did? They heard him and they went home to search the scripture to see if those things are so. But it's true that who wrote this poem? I'm not sure. It was H.M.S. Richards, I think, probably. How readest thou? And one of the verses, he actually says that you read the Bible with father's spectacles on your head, and you see the thing just as father says. I don't know, you probably don't remember the point. But anyway, it's interesting when I think about that perspective, that we are so connected to our churches and our institutions, that these churches and institutions lead us in the wrong path. That churches were opened their doors to become centers where certain things can be done to people in this world without ever hearing from God. What kind of a church is that? I mean, and I think, we think that through traditions and so on, all churches have become. Look at what it became in the days of Christ. Oh, it's a good segue here into the days of Christ. Look at what happened in the days of Christ. That the priest who was performing his priestly duties had the Son of God in his hand and did not even know. All that he saw was another poor parent with a pair of turtle doves. Okay? Had it not been for this man Simeon, who God told him, "You will not see death until you see the Lord's Christ." Had it not been for the confirmation of this old woman Huldah, or whatever her name was, Anna, right? That Son of God would have gone in there and left the sanctuary without any recognition. So, what do we see? Truth coming from unexpected sources. What do we see? Look at the birth of Christ. When it happened, who would have even known Christ was born, excepting there were some men that they were called wise men? Who were they? We call them what? Sorcerers. We call them what? Well, astrologers, but we still say that they're not Christians, so called. They're not people who are men of God per se. So who are the magics? They're magicians, right? Who were they really? There were people who studied the skies and so on. And had it not been for them, who would have known that that the Savior was born? And yet they saw his star, came to Israel, came to Herod, and said, where is he that is born King of the Jews? And he says, King, I don't know. He said, but look, we have seen the star. It's right there in your prophecies. We have come to worship him. Yes, they weren't a source of truth as that, because truth was with Israel. Truth was with the look what Herod did. Herod sought for the men who were men of the word. Herod called these men and they said, is it so? And they said, yes, O king, it is so. It is right here. And Herod said, go and find him. When you find him, you bring me back words so I may go and worship him as well. And look at these men that were able to hear from God in a dream. Do you know those people who believe in dreams? Who know those people that believe in dreams? That they say, look here, I get a dream last night. You know people like that? I know people like that. And look here, sometimes it's true, right? Sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's true that they do see in dreams, see things. Okay? And maybe belief kills and belief cures comes in as well, right? So and especially if you're believing in certain things, then you'll believe. But I mean, I know people who do you realize, like in Jamaica, I know specifically that every time that something happens and you go to see, you understand, you go to familiar spirits, right? Is always your neighbor. Is always, you realize that in the realm of the enemy is always your neighbor does something. Is always something planted in your yard. Is always something, somebody do something or throw something over the fence. It's always somebody, and it's never that you will be you no, you will never build relationship. You'll cut off people like that. Always. Yes, Praveen. Right. 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 Well, I mean, Brother Pinto was just saying that something similar is happening in his family right now with his brother and his sister, because a pastor in the Adventist church told her that her brother is holding her down, meaning he's keeping her back. And this is the perspective I see. I see a lot of this happening where people are told, you know, and that's why I realized that's what I realized, that this cannot be of God, because generally when you go to places like this, you're always now sees the person, another person, as your enemy, and it's not necessarily true, right? But the enemy knows how to divide us, because divided we fall and united we stand. All right, now let me wrap this up with the story of the last days. And I want you, and I'm closing even my tablet, because I want you to think about what Paul says here. The most terrible piece of Bible in the Bible is that First Thessalonians 2, or first or second, anyway. But it talks about the coming of this man of sin, the son of perdition. And it's interesting what it says about what causes. It talks about something that he says is a falling away, the King James Version. Other version tells you it's a great apostasy. Another version says it's a great rebellion that happens. And it's in the Christian church. It's not talking about apostasy. You don't apostatize as a worldlian. You don't rebel against God as a worldlian. You're already in rebellion. But he says something happens that causes a great falling away. And what is this? He says something happens, and it happens because the people in the church refuses the love of the truth. You go and examine it yourself. I'm putting it in my own words, but if you think I'm putting it wrong, then check it out. And he says, for this cause, or for this reason, God shall send them strong delusions, that they should even believe a lie, that they all might be damned. Have you read that before? Look here. It's the worst kind. I've never seen anything as wicked as this that is mentioned here, mentioned in the game of God, right? Now you say, well, Brother Howard, you know that God doesn't do evil, God allows. Like you say, and in full agreement, you say that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Was that true? Or did Pharaoh harden his own heart? But because God is sovereign and God is in control, it's easy when a person says, God does this, right? I can understand. They say God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Like this person whose wife died. And he said, man, I don't know why God did that, or why God took her so early or something, right? We grew up with that group singing a song, Daddy, Daddy, tell me what his heaven's like. You know that, you remember that song? Right? And even when my son was young, I thought I was going to sing it with him. And then I said, what nonsense is that? I couldn't do that, right? Because it's asking why God took mommy. And then the daddy said to him, we needed her, but heaven needed her more, and those kinds of things, right? And I guess I don't know. It's kind of I like to soothe that. It's kind of a way to soothe us and to kind of calm the emotions, whatever it is, right? But I'm just saying, look at the perspective. God sends them or God allows. In other words, if you are not being directed by God, you're making decisions on your own. God allows that. God doesn't stop you. So because you don't have love for the truth, and I'm not talking about truth as in theory. I'm not talking about truth as in the definition. I'm talking about truth as in the person. Because you don't love God, you're not connected to God, then you're not led by God. And if you're not led by God, what is going to lead you? What is going to lead is the influences around you. What is going to lead you is your government, is your pastor, is your society, or the devil, right? Because the devil is in the church. That's what Paul says. And so it's one of those hard thing to think about. And what it has helped me to do um, now more than ever is to never allow circumstances to push you to make decisions. Never allow circumstances to push you to make certain decisions. Use every opportunity as a means of hearing from him and deciding, do you want me to do this, God? Is this what I should do? Everybody's doing this. Should I do? What's this? These creatures, is it lemmings? I think they are. That at one point, like they just multiply fast and rapid, and then like at some point, one of them just start running, and everybody start to run. You know that you're not. It's a phenomenon in nature where they just run and they just head all the way to the sea and kill themselves. And it's true. I've seen in social experiments, and I've probably done one once or twice, where some people are sitting in the park and having a good day, and somebody just runs through and start to cry out and just hold them head and running. And some people, they don't even look to see what is happening. Everybody just take off down the road, right? And so I understand that this is the perspective that people are like that. People are not, they don't have independent minds. A lot of people don't think independently. They try to move and do what others are saying. That is why you have congregations, and that's why you have people. You know, like let's say, even say in an open forum like this, you'll always have people taking sides. Like people, there might be two different opinions, and some people say, "Well, I accept what Brother Vincent says," and some says, "No, I believe what Brother Optan says." So you always have people doing that, right? And somebody told me a story recently that there was an online meeting where there were two opponents. Somebody opposed the two opposing views were being purported, and so there was a split. There was a split with who were those who were online. Like so one group agreed with one brother and another group agreed with the other brother online, and then the other brother that was in disagreement with this brother said, is this what you're saying? Say, okay, I see what you're saying. Yes, man, I agree. And you leave all of those people who agreed with that brother now. They're left in limbo, right? Now, I've always thought about this as being interesting. How that, I don't know if this is something that you've ever thought about, how that one king was elected or selected in Israel, and that one king would lead the entire camp of Israel against God, and everybody gone into rebellion. You ever thought of that? And then one king comes back on the throne and begins to rule now and lead the people back to God. And everybody in the camp turn back to God. Have you thought of that before? Well, I read some commentaries, and it's interesting that this came from Ellen White. I read some commentaries where it says, this is Patriarchs and Prophets, where because of the things that were being done by Aaron's boys, who were they? Right, Eliab and Abihu. Anyway, Nahab, Nadab. Yeah. No. Anyway, these two boys were anyway, I was just saying the commentary from Ellen White was saying that that because of what they were doing, taking more than their fair share of the offerings and so on and so on. They said she said that there were people who refused to go to the place of worship and started having offering sacrifices at home. Right? It sounds feasible that at least there would have been some stalwarts who stood for principles, right? And I suppose they were. Maybe it's not something that was recorded or talked about, but I suppose they were. I suppose that not everybody, and just in the end, not everybody will ever be swayed by what is taking place. There'll always be people who are standing for God. And I mean, this is a strange thing. Truth is always coming out from unexpected sources. Even right now, today, in our world, there, there are sorry. Oh, I thought it was online. Even today in our world, there is a push against something that they call misinformation and disinformation. Where last week I told you what was happening even with YouTube and so on. And I mean, you just don't know when they will censor a video, right? I did a video on faith and they took it down. I violated community guidelines. What is that? Brother David told me they took down two of his videos, right? I mean, Brother David is not like me. You know that Brother David is always calm. He's always he makes sure he toes the line. Brother David is that kind of a person, right? He's not like me that I just say what is in my mind. And they took down two of his sermons. So what are they pushing you to do? You see it? See what they're doing? They're pushing you to say what they want you to say, and you better stay within that guideline. I'm telling you. So I realize, look, I realize, brothers and sisters, that the time has come and is here that we must know what we believe, who we believe in, who we are, what we have been made to be. Because outside of that, we're just going to be followers and followers. And Jesus says that if the blind follows the blind, what is going to be the result? Not just the leading blind going to fall, but the following blind. Does that make sense? All right, look, thank you so much for your time and company. I got my time signal quite some time back. So I hope that you'll just think about these things because, as I said, this is not just for to kill the time or 45 minutes to say something. It's not so. I'm hoping that you'll think about the things that we are saying because the decisions that we are making are every day. Look, decisions are coming. These decisions are in the pipe. Things are happening in the pipeline that we're going to cause you to make decisions. I'm not sure if we're ready for it. I don't know if I'm ready for it, but I just want to know that I'm connected to Christ and that he will lead me into truth. I don't want to make a mistake out of fear. I don't want to make a decision, sir, out of fear. I want to make a decision for love. All right. I did get it. Let me just say one last thing. Is that good? What's one last thing? This morning I was talking about an interview I listened to recently. Huh? Yes. This morning I was talking about an interview I listened to recently. How that this person was saying that Christianity really is a cult, is a death cult, but it's not they don't bring it to the people like openly. They don't tell you that this is what it's about. But he says that the person who started Christianity, Jesus actually um what did I say now? He encourages, but he actually exalts those who listen now are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Those who are killed for the gospel, right? And he said, think about it. That is the essence of it. We say Muslims. Look at what we say. Muslims. What kind of a religion is that? That these people are so fanatical that they will put bombs on themselves and blow themselves up for the cause. But he says, is Christianity any different? All right. Now look, you'll say, well, I agree or I don't agree. But there are elements of truth in what is being said. And the element of truth is that we are in the world, but we're not of the world. That's the first element of truth, that Christians are not of the world, but they are in the world. I pray, Lord, that you will not take them out of the world, but you will keep them from what? Oh, I thought you had that. Keep them from the evil, right? So this is the perspective. So we are a different class, a different category, a different race of beings. Most people don't see themselves as that. They see themselves as just being normal like everybody else. But it's not true. We are a different race of beings, but we are ambassadors for a different kingdom to establish the principles of the kingdom here, not just in speaking it, but living it. And that is why eventually When the reality of the clutches of the kingdom come, you will see that only those who are on the Lord's side will be able to live for the Lord. Miracles will only take place for those who are on the Lord's side. Miracles and all of these things that are prophesied to happen will only happen when the light breaks forth. Royal priesthood. So I pray that we will all be thankful for becoming a member of his family, and that will allow him to live and for us to truly stay dead